Hello and welcome to the first and best ever episode of Player Chat. My name's Angelo, and today we're joined by Guy Blomberg of PAX Australia and many other goings on in like the last 10 years or so.
That's true.
Thank you
very much for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it, to take time out of your busy schedule of being part of conventions and things like that. So, Guy, what is it that you do at the moment?
Well, right now I'm enjoying not being inside the convention in this lovely Adelaide weather now. No, in general, my title is the content manager. So I'm the content manager for ReedPop, and we look after PAX Australia and Oz Comic Con here in Australia. Primarily, I'm more focused on the PAX side of things, my background in the video game industry and whatnot. I like to say the content side of things it consists of everything except for the exhibitors on the expo floor. So content in terms of panels, features, community spaces, tournament areas, overseeing a lot of the volunteers a lot of the time as well, especially in PAX, and things like that. So very much being the glue around the other fields that do stuff in the convention side of things.
Interesting. All right. So yeah, there's a lot I want to go into in the half an hour or so that we have. But first
Let's
of all, I want to start with PAX. So I remember late 2012 when I got told by some American friends of mine that, oh my God, there was a PAX happening in Australia, and I was freaking out. I was like, this is bullshit, right? This can't be happening. But So how did that come about? How did we finally get a PAX, and how did the first international PAX come to Australia?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that awesome though? Because everyone was like, there'll be a PAX in Europe. I mean, we'll go to London or something like that.
That's what you'd think.
It was this great little kind of like when I found out we were going to do it in Australia. It was like a real.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Are we allowed to swear on this?
Oh, sure.
Oh, you can bleep me out.
First episode is this.
Okay. But it was a lot of fun to find that out. There were a lot of factors behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, ReedPop, we work with Penny Arcade over in the States, and we're always looking for somewhere to actually go outside of North America. To be honest, the Australian gaming community, is very strong down here, and there was a lot of vocal support to actually bring a PAX down here. Also, in terms of like Penny Arcade, their readership, their merch sales and things like that, Australia, I think it was like the third highest region.
Okay.
And in terms of per capita, that's insane.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of demand for it. But even with PAX, you now see that with like following conventions sort of thing that come down here, big ones from the US like GX Australia or RTX or whatnot. So it's not an isolated incident just with the Penny Arcade community. It's definitely the culture that we have here around gamers and people that are actually fans of all this stuff. So did that actually answer your question?
Yeah.
I tend to waffle off in particular directions.
That's fine.
So.
No, I feel like it did, because it's really interesting that you brought up those other conventions. That's what I want to mention as well, because I'd been going to AvCon when it was based at Adelaide University, and that was like, when I first went to AvCon, it was 2005, I think it was.
Right.
And then a couple of years later, it then moved to the convention center. And then in that time, I went to university. I didn't really go to conventions or anything that much because I was too busy being a nerd in other respects. But then when I finally went to AvCon at the convention center, I noticed that it got quite huge. And in that time, about a year or two after that, that's when I noticed that there were more conventions and stuff happening in Adelaide. So do you feel like conventions just sort of like exploded or at least could you say that conventions sort of exploded in like the last few years or so?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to quantify this. I've only really been directly involved in conventions since the first PAX in 2013, and prior to that, you might feel this is similar being in Adelaide, but I was based in Brisbane, in Queensland.
Yep.
And up there, any conventions that we got, it was a special occurrence. Anytime we got any attention whatsoever.
Yeah, that's right.
Anytime we got something, instead of Sydney or Melbourne, frankly, was like a big deal, know.
Same for us.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was always Supernova was the big one, And we had a Gen Con at one point as well for a couple of years. But I think there's always been, ever since like the early 2000s, this pop culture kind of convention scene that's been bubbling up and rising up. I think in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been more events around specific niche elements of pop culture, whether that be gaming, whether that be around specific communities like RTX or whatnot, whether that be around even niche elements like CanCon, that's a tabletop convention in Canberra. And even you've got these intimate events that are around just singular celebrities or whatnot. There's definitely more events popping up now, but if you look at it just within the relativity of a specific city, so here in Adelaide, I would say you've got AvCon, Supernova, Oz Comic Con.
But then up until I feel like a few years ago, we didn't have those except for AvCon.
Yep.
Like Supernova. Like again, you mentioned Supernova coming to Brisbane. Like I remember, like 5-6 years ago, thinking, oh man, like Supernova seems pretty cool, but when the hell are we going to get in Adelaide?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I just looked at a newspaper, and there it was coming to Adelaide. So
very good. Yeah.
It's
yeah, it has. I don't know what the best model is though, in terms of should there be. Like we do both. We've got an Oz Comic Con in most of the capital cities around Australia.
Yep.
So every year there's an Oz Comic Con in Adelaide. The flip side to that is PAX. There's only one PAX, and that PAX is in Melbourne at the moment, and it's every year, once a year. So people make a pilgrimage, trek to that. It's the Woodstock of gaming every year.
So
sort of
the
thing.
community just
exactly. So which is better? Is it better for the conventions to actually go to each city? Or is it better for just to have the one? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. They both have their pros and cons.
What's the logistics behind that in terms of like PAX being in Melbourne? Like, do you see it like say in 5 years' time being big enough to say have another one say on the other side of the country in Perth?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we look at the model that was started over in North America.
Yeah.
You know, the first PAX over there was in 2004 in Seattle. And the second one, I think, started in 2010 in Boston. And a big reason for that was because the one in Seattle sold out. Like, you know, tickets sold out. You can't buy tickets at the door. It's ridiculous. I think these days they sell out in like 6 minutes.
Yeah.
The demand was there. And the convention got to the point where it was outgrowing the actual convention center in Seattle. And now it takes up like 6 city blocks.
Yeah.
And uses up every hotel room and space around the general area. So for them, it was like, well, this is logical. We should, you know, create a second PAX on the other side of the country.
Yep.
So I guess in answer to your question, it's not completely out of the realms of possibility, but in the same respect, we don't exactly have the same population as North America
absolutely not.
to
That's
justify
right.
that.
That's
But
right.
you know what? If we ever completely max out the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre capacity and sell out all our tickets in ridiculous amounts, and we have such a vocal community saying it's not fair, you know, that we don't get the chance to actually go to this as well, then we'd explore it. But I don't know, that'd be quite down the track, I think.
Yeah, I'd imagine it'd be a hell of a lot of work as well.
I'm not. Yeah, let's avoid that, actually. Let's just do the one. The one's good.
Yeah, fair enough. So you're here in Adelaide for Oz Comic Con. So
Yes.
does that mean that you also followed it down to Perth as well? And do you stick with Oz Comic Con throughout the whole year?
I go to all the Oz Comic Cons. I oversee the content across all the Comic Cons. Although I actually have someone that works with me, a girl by the name of Michelle, who's actually used to work at Smash, actually, and is actually from the cosplay and anime community and whatnot. And she's kind of stepped up to pretty much run all the separate elements of Comic-Con, so anime and cosplay and the championship tournament, the championship cosplay events that happen on the main stage, and all the community elements and panels and whatnot. So I'm more here in a overseeing capacity, and at a top level, if there's any problems or issues, then that I can jump in and manage them. So
cool.
And I spend most of my time sitting around the gaming area.
Yeah,
to be honest,
of course.
and making sure the VR doesn't screw up.
Yeah.
So that's very important. It's very important.
I imagine it would be. So when you come to a convention, you say that you oversee some of the smaller areas and stuff. So what's that like for you? Say you go to, how many Oz Comic Cons are there? 5?
There's five Oz Comic Cons.
So does that mean that at least like once every 2 months you're traveling around the country and stuff? So do you travel a lot in between that as well, or do you just try to stay home?
No, I travel a lot.
Yeah.
I travel a lot. I think it's funny. My housemate is a game producer, and she actually works very late nights, and she actually does some other cosplay stuff and travels around a bit as well. And between the two of us and our travel schedules, I haven't seen her in over a month.
Wow.
Like we live together, but just haven't been in the same building. You know?
That's crazy. That's nuts.
Yeah. So there's a lot of traveling that comes with events. And it's not just going to the events themselves either, but especially from a content point of view, it's critical for us to understand and know who the community is. And make sure that we're doing these events at the service of the attendees and the community. So I come down here to Adelaide for AvCon as well, and it's not about like, sussing it out, what's the competition. In fact, we collaborate very closely with AvCon.
Yeah, you would have to,
But it's very much just trying to understand each city and the nuances of each city, and try and figure out, what are the things that work here that don't work so well in Perth, or this city is much more into the anime side of things. We should try and work on that. Maybe we should look at guests specifically from this particular culture or whatnot. I mean, if you just lump them all in the same and say they're all Australian shows, then what's the point of doing one in each city?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and myself being a person who's primarily only really gone to AvCon and PAX, like there's a stark difference between the communities surrounding both. Like like you say, at AvCon, like definitely the anime side of things is much bigger, and you got some of the indie game stuff there as well.
Yeah.
But it's still like a small pocket compared to the rest of that convention.
Sure.
But then you go to PAX, and PAX is just huge for games and stuff. I don't really know. Personally, I don't think I've noticed too much anime stuff going on there at all. But like,
we don't actually. No, PAX is games. It's video games and tabletop games. In fact, we don't do anything that would confuse it with a broader pop culture show. And that's very, very much on purpose. Like, there are heaps of people cosplaying at PAX.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't run any cosplay competitions. We don't have any cosplay spaces. We don't do anything specifically for cosplay. We have a cosplay change room and repair room sort of thing, because that's every convention should do that. But we don't specifically go out of our way to do any cosplay events, because even though you can have gaming elements in cosplay is still a much broader pop culture concept.
Yep.
So for us to actually focus down onto just games, we've got to make sure that the entire show reflects that.
Yep.
And it is very much the people that identify as, whether they identify as gamers quite broadly, or whether they just know that they play a lot of games or they love a lot of games, the show is made for them, tailor-made for them. And that's, I think, why it's so successful, is because it's very, very specific.
Yeah.
And PAX knows what it wants to be based on the audience that come.
Yeah, fair enough. So in that case, is there much of, being someone who, I'd imagine that you'd have gone to the US PAX shows as well?
I go to every US PAX show, yeah.
So is there a huge difference between, say, the US PAX shows and the Australian ones, or do you guys try to keep it as close to what they do over there as possible?
There's absolutely differences, yeah. Yep. Even when you can't just pick up a show in North America and just paste it down here without actually understanding the sensitivities around, the cultural differences or regional differences. And also, we don't have as much access to amazing North American developers.
That's very true.
That's very true. I think probably the biggest difference for me is, being at PAX West and seeing a panel with like Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert and a whole bunch of other industry luminaries, and that over there is just a panel. Whereas over here, it's like, oh man, that's my keynote.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's also over here we get very creative in terms of what kind of content or panels. We curate a lot of it ourselves, whereas over in the States, a lot of it is, there's a lot of ideas submitted through the much broader community. So, but that's great as well, because we've come up with a whole bunch of ideas here that then get implemented in the North American shows. Yep. So whether that be, from the stand-up comedy events that we have, or the food fight cooking event that happens, or the Jackbox panel, where the Jackbox games guys actually repurpose the games to be PAX-specific clues and stuff like that. And there's a lot of fun stuff that we do that then gets put into the US show. So that's a lot of fun. But to be honest, the biggest difference is probably size. The crowd sizes and the expo hall. Over in America, it is big, and especially if you go to PAX East, the expo hall is just massive. Probably the exhibition center that we use for PAX, which houses the expo hall, the free play areas, and the tabletop areas. In PAX East, that entire thing is just an expo hall. So it's massive at a much bigger scale. But the Australian show, we have the ethos of PAX. We keep that culture intact. We look at the free play areas and the areas that aren't pushing or trying to shill a particular product, and we cultivate those spaces that encourage complete strangers to actually come together to celebrate these shared interests that they have around specific games. And that's kind of the most important part of PAX for us to take away from the American shows, is to actually, bring people together to actually make friends based on these shared interests around video games, and that's where the celebration happens.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great, and I really appreciate the fact that PAX is in Australia, because we do need.
I wouldn't have a job. Yeah. I'd be doing magic tricks on the street.
Well, Australia's always needed like a big sort of gaming community convention rather than just like a video game specific convention, like say something like EB Expo or something like that. But
sure, yeah. And look, back in the day, I went to E-Games Expo, or there was an event called Game One over in Perth. Go 3, or there's a Game 1. Like, there have been other gaming conventions that have happened in Australia throughout this time. And EB Games, like, everyone kind of throws shade at the EB Games Expo, but I went to the first one up in the Gold Coast, so for me that was one of the most important events that happened in Australia, because it was the first one where every major publisher actually attended, and we kind of had our E3 true. Moment.
Yeah, that's true.
And don't get me wrong, like I think it's a very specific event where it's very much around the games and the retail components, and line up and play a game for 5 minutes and have that new game experience and everything like that. And whereas PAX is much more community based, but you know, there's differences between the two, but they both have their place.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, that's a good answer actually to that.
It is. I'm also very diplomatic about that. Yeah, like I get thrown at that one all the time. I go to EB Expo every year, and everyone's always, you know, saying, "Oh, you sussing out the competition. You're gonna steal some concepts." It's like, I don't have to work at the show, guys. I'm just here to play some games.
That's true. Yeah, I've never been to the EB Expo myself, but that's always what I sort of hear is that sort of not really comparison, but you know, there does seem to be a bit more fanfare for something like PAX than there is for EB Expo for whatever reason.
You're fine. You just go to PAX. You're fine.
Yeah. So we've talked about PAX.
Sure.
You're excited about PAX. I'm usually excited about PAX. That's great. But let's go back quite a while. Let's go. So my earliest. The earliest point that you touched upon my life was Australian Gamer, but were there things that you were working on within the game sort of Australian scene before that, or?
No. Okay. Australian Gamer was the first thing. I worked with a friend of mine, Matt, and we're both in the website design development business, and we were both big gamers. You know, we played a lot of games, and especially in that IT culture, you know, everyone plays games and whatnot. You'd stay back late at night and do a bunch of StarCraft or CNC or stuff like that.
LAN parties, all that stuff.
We're right into that, and we were big fans of Penny Arcade, ironically. And we looked at the Penny Arcade website, and I was actually a graphic designer, so I had a couple of design skills and whatnot. and Matt was a programmer, but also a snarky writer. And we were like, man, we should do something like Penny Arcade, but for Australia, because at that time there was no localized IGN or GameSpot or Kotaku. Like, you know, there was a couple of other community sites, Xbox World, PowerGen, Vooks.
We had a bunch of magazines.
We did have a bunch of magazines.
In terms of internet,
absolutely.
You're right. Like, it was mostly community centered.
Yeah, so there was just kind of this frustration that, you know, you'd always read these articles about these games, and then even just the price point being in US dollars or the release date being wrong or stuff like that was frustrating. It was also frustrating to try and find, you know, a community of, we're Australians writing about games or loving games or whatnot. So that's where the whole idea came from. And it was a bit of a joke, I guess, when we first did it. It was like, hey, we can do a games website. This will be fun. And it became much more than just a joke. So
it got quite big, didn't it? And you guys ended up cultivating and bringing up some other people, or sort of attracted more aspiring writers. And then since then they've all moved on and things like that. So I guess what I'd like to know about Australian Gamer is like you guys ended up merging it with Game Planet. That's correct?
Yes, we did.
So leading into that, how big do you feel that Australian Gamer got, and do you miss it in a way?
Australian Gamer at its peak, if I can go into stats, like it was getting around about 250,000 unique views a month. Which by anyone's standards these days is actually pretty good for a niche targeted audience. But back
specifically for an Australian site too,
but back then we had no idea what we were doing. we were just messing around. We particularly wanted to be the ones that could say and get away with whatever we wanted. We had no support or advertising or anything like that. We cultivated good relationships with publishers, I think, because we drank a lot. You know, and that's always good when it comes to getting along with publishers and other media outlets as well. And we were in Brisbane as well, which means we were isolated. So whenever we came down to Sydney, where like all the publishers and other media were, you know, we made an entrance and we always got along with everyone. I don't know, we're friendly and happy-go-lucky, and through that we actually built a good reputation within the general gaming industry. And in terms of like the community, they responded really well. We created a forum, and the forums actually just went nuts. Like they really grew, and it really, I think we treated the gaming community not as this segregated, ostracized, pasty white fat nerds in their parents' basement kind of concept. It was, myself and Matt were very social, very outgoing. I went out clubbing on the weekends, man. Like, and we'd organize gatherings, not in not really LAN parties, but like I'd hire out nightclub rooms, or like I'd organize these gamer meetups and whatnot. And I think there was among us this real strong promotion that, you know, gamers aren't terrible huddled together kind of people. It's like, no, we're just like everyone else.
Yeah,
in fact, a lot of us are probably cooler than the rest of you, sort of thing. So
well, of course we are.
That exactly. So that kind of maybe arrogant attitude, I think, resonated really strongly.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, so comparing what it was like back then, roughly when did Australian Gamer merge with Gameplay? Was that 2010?
It was a little. Oh God, it was probably a little bit later than that. Maybe 2012.
Oh, okay.
2011, 2012.
Okay, so
it was just before. I might be wrong. You might be right. Maybe it was 2010.
I can't remember. I remember Manabar being around 2010, so I thought it might have been around that time.
It was definitely after. Actually, it was definitely after Manabar. So
okay.
It was 2000. It would have been 2012.
Okay, so between. So say the last 5 years or so, have you noticed, being on the outside now looking in to that sort of thing, have you seen much of a difference between how community sites were operating back then to how they are now? Me personally, the way I look at them, I look at a lot of people now, you know, they come to places like this and like, oh, we have a YouTube channel and we're super special. You know, we deserve media passes and all this kind of stuff. Was it like that back then as well?
No, well, we didn't have YouTube back then, really. It wasn't really a big thing, was it? And, you know, in terms of online video content and whatnot, I think that's only really taken off in the last 5 years or so. I think that a lot of the gaming websites and traditional media and journalists struggle to find their place in the world at the moment, when most of their readers, or especially like upcoming readers, are getting most of their information and content from content creators. You know, Twitch streamers and YouTubers, which makes all the sense in the world. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have been doing this for a while that don't understand it. They're like, you know, they should be interested in valid, long-standing opinions of people that can see the trends in games and understand the behind the scenes and can provide quality journalism and stuff like that. But, you know, if we're seeing anything just in general with the world today, quality journalism doesn't really hold a candle to just straight up entertainment at such a quantity that it is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I guess with the scope of the internet, I mean, you know, the internet's always been sort of a wild west of anything, and it's not going to change anytime soon, you know, despite what people try to do.
Sure.
So, like, do you feel, I had it in my head and I've forgotten it now, actually, the way that influencers and, you know, YouTube personalities deliver, like, their opinions or news, however you want to put it, do you feel that it's any different or worse or better than how it would have been back in the day when, you know, you had a lot of community sites who weren't specifically journalists?
I think there's a lot of, these days there's a lot of content creators, and I can only talk about this from the dealings that I've had with a lot of content creators, whether it be with PAX or Comic-Con or stuff like that. I think there's way more of a sense of entitlement at the moment, where people actually they have a path, they can see a view to success through YouTube or Twitch streaming or something like that. Whereas I think, you know, at the beginning of this movement, there was much more innovation. There was much more. You say anything goes on the internet. You're absolutely right. Which means if you have an idea or a concept or, you know, some way to separate yourself from everyone else, then you can just do it. And if that works, that audience will actually build and you will be successful. Whereas I think a lot of people simply look at other people's successes on YouTube and Twitch, and they go, well, I want to be like that, so I'm simply going to do that particular path as well.
We haven't even touched on Twitch. That's a whole...
Twitch is a whole other side of things.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so I guess that's Australian Gamer talked about. So what about Manabar then? Like,
what about Manabar?
I remember being super jazzed. It was around the time that I was finishing up my first degree, and I was super jazzed on the idea of like a video game bar coming to Australia. So, and it started out in Brisbane, and then it came to Melbourne, and you guys had plans for one in Sydney, but that didn't actually happen, did it?
No. I moved to Sydney, and my intention in Sydney was actually to open up a third bar. So I was actually scoping out venues in suburbs that we felt would be appropriate, me and my business partners, and we were looking at Newtown. Actually, we found a cool space in Newtown on King Street, actually, which now is a Max Brenner chocolate store. Actually, but I remember, like, we getting very close to actually seriously looking at that. We wanted to expand very rapidly. And that's why we expanded very quickly from Brisbane to Melbourne, because when talking to people, it's like, oh, what, the video game bar, Mana Bar. Oh yeah, that little bar in Brisbane. It's very easy to actually say, oh, that niche little bar in Brisbane. But when you've got 2 bars of the same name in 2 cities, it's like, oh, the Mana Bar. Oh yeah, the franchise, the bars. Like it changes people's perceptions of it.
Yep.
And I think we felt that the Brisbane venue was very successful, and it really captured the imagination, not just of local gamers, but international ones as well. So we wanted to expand that very quickly. And Melbourne was very hard. It was a very difficult...
It was a much smaller place as well, wasn't it?
It was a little bit smaller, but it took a lot more time to actually open. We misjudged the difficulty to do the Melbourne bar, and that hurt. But once it had opened, our plan was to do Sydney next, and I moved to Sydney. I got a little distracted, I guess you could say. I was approached by Penny Arcade.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's how it happens, isn't it? So with Mana Bar, that was a really new concept at the time, wasn't it? Because I don't even recall it really being anything big in America yet.
Yeah, right?
So
there were bars that had video games in them, especially in Japan.
Yeah.
But for us, we wanted to actually create a space that was not overly geeky, actually. It was somewhere where primarily it was a good bar. It was a good cocktail bar, and people that liked good bars and good drinks would actually walk past and wander in. So the lighting was low, the music was playing over the top and everything like that. Secondary to that was the social gaming aspect.
Yep.
So, the pick up and play turn-based video games. And those things actually made it quite, I guess, socially acceptable to a broader market and demographic. To be honest, the advent of SingStar on the PlayStation and the Nintendo Wii, I think, were the 2 big products that kind of broke gaming out of that mold and had it so they were like, people who I would never consider even think about, grabbing a gaming controller at all, were like having full-on drunken parties and busting out SingStar. Like, what? So I think gaming lost a lot of its stigma at that particular point. So we were just in the right place in the right time to actually create this concept that resonated with so many people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was one of the very fortunate people who got to go to Melbourne's Mana Bar, even though, it was all the way in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I think I went there twice, actually.
Cool.
And it was good fun, really nice atmosphere and everything. And it was quite full at the time.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, man.
Yeah. So how do you, looking at the success of Mana Bar at the time, do you feel like you guys sort of started something in Australia? Because I'll tell you how things were in Adelaide at the time. Around 2011, the Pimp Pad opened up.
I am well aware of the Pimp
the
Pad.
very infamous Pimp Pad run by Pimp TV, genuine spot for legitimate news. They opened up right next to a school, Amesbury College, I believe it was, just outside of Victoria Square. And in theory, it seemed like a pretty cool place. It was a 3-storied bar.
Yep.
Each level had a different thing. So the first level was like your entry sort of place. You got the second level, which was like console gaming and things. And the third level was
all
your
the
PC games.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. You go in there, but I remember it took him like at least 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 months to be able to get a liquor license at the place. And they had all these other great plans where they wanted to have a projector going from the building out to the street across from them on another building where they'd have games and things, which was problematic. And, the council, the Adelaide Council, was apprehensive about getting them any sort of liquor license because they were right next to a school and all these kinds of things. Like, did you guys face any sort of turmoil like that? And did you feel like that you were starting a trend?
Oh my God, yeah, dude. We planned to open the Melbourne bar, I think 6 months before we actually did. And we had massive issues with liquor licensing. When we applied for the liquor license and all the other paperwork that we had to go through the local council, they knocked it back because they were like, oh, it's a gaming bar, so it has gambling.
Yeah, it was around the time that video games was a very negative thing. We didn't even have R18 or anything like that.
To be honest, it was just their misunderstanding of when we were talking about gaming. There's a word to the wise. When dealing with government, never ever say gaming or the gaming industry. Always say digital video games or like video games or computer games.
Because otherwise they just assumed like pokies and casinos.
Yeah, and even then, like we had to go through so many resubmissions and we had to hire like consultants to actually help us submit this stuff just because we had video games in the bar as part of the concept, and we actually had pushback from council that were like, well, we believe that having violent video games will incite violent behavior, alcohol fueled violence. These are the issues that that are cited when it comes to liquor licensing and things like this. So it took us a much longer time to get a license. And even back in Brisbane, in order to actually get the venue that we wanted, which was in the Judith Wright Center of Contemporary Arts, a government-funded art institute, we had to actually prove to the government, to the state government in Queensland, that video games were art to justify using that space. That's, you know, all these people talk about video games, art, or whatnot. You know what? We have quantifiable evidence backed up by the government that it is. So, we went through massive headaches and hurdles, and we were very lucky that, part of the core team that worked on the Manor Bar was my friend Shay, whose background and history had been in opening up bars all up and down the east coast of Australia. So he had that knowledge and experience. And even our other business partner, Praz, had a lot of experience with contracts and negotiations and the business side of things. So there were other people on our team that were well versed and had the ability to actually, make things happen. Yeah. But I don't envy a lot of people that go into opening up a video game bar just with the whole concept of like, it'll be easy. We just get the venue, and then we make the bar, and then we just serve the drinks, and we get a liquor license, and we get the console. It's easy, right? It's there's a lot more that goes into it. And at the very least, I feel that, we paved the way for a case study, for concepts. And we definitely inspired other geek and gaming-based venues, definitely locally and certainly internationally. I've been asked to be on many panels when I'm over from the PAXs, hosted by people over there that run video game bars, and everywhere from Portland to Boston and Seattle and all around America. And every single one of them are like, we were inspired, and we got a lot of our ideas when we saw the Manor Bar in Australia. That was the first time where we were like, this could be a thing. We can do this, or let's do this. So I'm very proud of that particular legacy. Yeah, no, that's great. And you're absolutely right. Like, did you feel like if someone was to open up a barcade, as they call them now, or a video game bar, sure. Like, is it? Do you feel like it might be easier to do that now, since you guys went through that hurdle at the beginning? 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Even just the concept of video game bars with gaming companies. Like, it was a couple of months before Sony really supported the Manor Bar, because they were like, well, our products aren't supposed to be used in a public space in this particular way. And even, to be honest, Nintendo were like, look, we'll provide you with all the consoles, but you can't actually use the word Nintendo anywhere, because we can't really be associated with with alcohol, I guess. I'm not exactly sure of the details. That's really interesting. But it was because of the relationships we'd cultivated through Australian Gamer that we were able to get that support. But even then, like, it was such a new concept that it took a while for them to actually get on board. Excellent. All right. Well, I guess that's all the time we have for you at the moment. You got things to do. I do. Yeah, that's right. I'm being called right now. Yeah. So we'll leave it there. So thank you very much for joining us, and see you around sometime. Dude, thank you very much for your time. This is great. Excellent.